Welcome to Pythagorean Identities Part 1. Let's take a look at our example. Find cosecant of theta and cosine of theta if sine of theta is equal to negative 4/5 and cosine of theta is positive. In order for us to come up with the values of interest, we're going to use a three-step process, namely the following. Step 1, let's identify what you're given. Step number 2, let's identify what you want. And step number 3, let's look for any relationships and let's do the math in order to come up with those particular values of interest. So let's use this three-step process as follows. Step number 1, let's identify what you're given. In this case, if we pay close attention, we're given that sine of theta is equal to negative 4/5, so we can write that down. And we're also given that cosine will be greater than 0, that is, cosine is positive. Now for step 2, we want to identify what we want. In this case, we're interested in two things. We want the value for cosecant of theta, and we also want the value for cosine of theta. Once we have determined what we want to go to step number 3, which is to find any relationships and do the math. In this case, we know that sine is related to cosecant in the following way. We know that cosecant of theta is equal to 1 over sine of theta. In other words, cosecant is the reciprocal of sine. Now, in order for us to link sine of theta to cosine of theta, we can use this Pythagorean identity. Sine square of theta plus cosine square of theta is equal to 1. Now that we have obtained the two relationships or the two identities, our job is to substitute in values and to do the math. Now, focusing our attention on the first identity, we know that cosecant of theta is equal to 1 over sine of theta. In other words, cosecant of theta is the reciprocal of sine of theta. Since sine of theta is negative 4/5, we take the reciprocal of that to be cosecant. So the reciprocal of negative 4/5, it's simply negative 5/4. And notice that this will give you the first value of interest. Now, focusing our attention on the second identity, we can substitute in the values that we know. We happen to know the value for sine, so we can say, well, sine square of theta, it's going to be negative 4/5 quantity square, plus cosine of theta quantity square is equal to 1. Now, negative 4/5 quantity square becomes 16/25. Then we have plus cosine square of theta, that is equal to 1. In this case, we want to get the cosine by itself, so let's go ahead and subtract 16/25 from both sides of the equation. This will lead us to the following equivalent equation. Cosine square theta is equal to 1 minus 16/25. Now, rewriting the 1 as 25/25 so we can have the same denominator, we get the following expression on the right hand side of the equation. 25/25 minus 16/25. Doing the math, we get that cosine square of theta is equal to 25/25 minus 16/25, which is equal to 9/25. But notice, that's not what we're interested in. We don't want cosine square of theta. What we want is cosine of theta. So let's go ahead and get rid of the square by taking the square root on both sides of the equation. So this implies that cosine of theta is equal to plus or minus the square root of 9/25. However, using the properties of radicals, we can say that this is equal to plus or minus the square root of 9 over the square root of 25. And we know that this is equal to plus or minus the square root of 9, which happens to be 3, over the square root of 25, which happens to be 5. So notice that we can say, well, cosine of theta can be either the positive 3/5 or the negative 3/5. However, this is where the next piece of information that was given to us comes into play. We did know that cosine was positive. So in this case, we're going to focus with the positive value. So we can conclude that cosine of theta is equal to positive 3/5. And notice that this will give you the second value of interest. So this concludes our video on Pythagorean Identities Part 1. Thank you for watching and have a wonderful day.